Hey, okay, so I'm doing a practice run of a talk that I'm giving at Open West next week. And yeah, so I'm actually giving two talks, and so I might practice both of them tonight if I have the chance. So yeah, this talk is called Simply React. And yeah, maybe if some people are watching, that'd be cool. But if nobody watches, I'm practicing. So feel free to leave me feedback in the chat. And hopefully this goes well. So I'm gonna just line some stuff up here and off we go. Hi everyone, my name is Kent C. Dodds and I'm a software engineer for PayPal, and this is some information about me. I've got a wife and 4 kids and a dog, and like I don't know what I was thinking. My oldest is not even 6 yet, so we're just glutton for punishment, but my dog is super cute. So all of these things are actually links, and so you can go check those out at your leisure. My slides are kcd.im/simply-react, so don't worry about taking notes or anything of like text that you see up here. Just go to the slides later. So all this is a bunch of stuff about me. I'm not going to belabor you with that, but I would like to belabor you with something special. Please stand if you are physically able to do so. And for those of you watching at home here during this practice run, you can stand too. All right, we're going to do something that I like to do at the beginning of my talks to kind of get us loose and things. Put your arms out in front of you like this and squat down and back up. That's called an air squat. We're going to do 12 of these together. So, and I want you to count out loud with me. So arms out, ready? 1, 2, 3, you're doing great. 4, 5, count louder please. 6, 7, 6, just kidding. 8, 9, 10, just 2 more. 11 and 12. Awesome. Okay, before you sit down, stretch up right over your head and stretch over to one side and over to the other. That feels awesome. My dog is like, are you gonna play with me now? No, sorry, I've got to practice this talk. Okay, yeah, go ahead and before you sit down, turn to the person next to you, introduce yourself, and thank them for coming to the conference. All right, awesome. Go ahead and take a seat. Cool, so I like to start out my talk with expectations. So this talk is going to be examples of complex component implementations and APIs and patterns you can use to simplify them. We're not going to get too deep into the implementation details, just more conceptually how you could, the types of APIs that you could expose. This talk is not geared toward React and JavaScript beginners necessarily. I should probably change that because it's not talking implementation details specifically. It could still inspire those people. So this is why we practice to do. I'm not sure what to do about that. So if you are a beginner, then I highly suggest you check out my Learn React course. It's totally free on Egghead.io, and it will get you up to speed. And if you are an experienced learner of React, then you can level up with my Advanced React course. I got to update the logo because it was updated today. And then I also have this on Front-End Masters, and I'm doing this online as well in online workshops. So follow me on Twitter and my newsletter to keep up with that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to focus on this accordion. So it's a pretty basic accordion. You have this ability to expand items. And so like, just go with me in the mind of the developer who's creating this. And the product owner comes and says, hey, we need an accordion on this page, and this is the way it needs to look and behave. And you say, awesome. And like any good developer who's not overthinking things, you just say, okay, I'll make an accordion component and on click and expand. I'll add some animations. It'll be great. And then I'll just accept some items. We'll call those accordion items. And then I'll iterate through those, however many items that you have. And then we'll render the title and the contents and so on and so forth. And then some other product owner comes to you and says, hey, that accordion you built on that page, we need an accordion like that on this page. And the developer says, yeah, so the design calls for a little bit different experience. For ours, we actually need the contents to show up above the accordion. So actually what I think I'm gonna do, let's do this, have this go up after, do the same thing with this one. So you see the experience first and the usage second. Let's do this for all of these. You're getting a spoiler, don't look. Close your eyes for just a sec. You're looking, don't look, stop looking. You're gonna see this in a second. You're gonna just spoil it for yourself. Okay. Okay. Cool. So we'll go back up here, preview. Okay, and so you just implement it like this. Ta-da! Then somebody says, "Hey, I need this same accordion, but it needs to be a little bit different. I need the contents to show up above the accordion item that I select instead of below." Say, okay, that'll be pretty simple. I'll just have a new prop called above, and if it's true, then we'll have it render above. So you update your render method to handle this. You know, if this.props.above, then render it above, otherwise you render it below. Not a huge deal. You have to make a couple changes with animation and stuff, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same. So cool, you're great. And then somebody says, "Hey, I need an accordion that works on the right." So the items are on the right, it expands on the left, or vice versa. You click on the thing on the left, it expands on the right. Could you make something like that for me? And you say, okay, yeah, sure. Now we have a right, and I'll just, you know, thank heaven for CSS Grid. It's actually pretty straightforward to implement this, and so your render method starts to get a little bit more complicated, but it's still manageable. And then of course somebody comes and says, "Hey, I need it on the left," and you're like, "Okay, somehow this got missed." You know? Oh, that's right. This one. There we go. Okay. I want this to come in later. Okay. So okay, no big deal. We'll just say left true, and now you got a bunch of things. And then pretty soon, David Piano, I don't know what his actual last name is, I should probably find out, but he says, "Hey, listen, this is not a good situation. You have impossible states that are possible. So you're supposed to make impossible states possible. So I could make a left is true, and a right is true, and a top is true, and a bottom is true. Like I could make all of these things true. Which one is going to win?" And so it's important that you make impossible states impossible. And so here we're going to change that to position left now. And so now it's position top, position left, position right. Great, not too bad. Our render method's starting to get a little bit more complicated, but it's you know, it's an accordion. I mean, it's a complex UI component, right? So then somebody says, "Hey, so your original component was fine from the way that it looks, but the way it behaves, I need it changed. I need to have you just add this little if statement in set state that says, what is that? Slides app? It's slides.com. Haha. Yeah, so it's basically the same. I just need this little simple if statement in your set state call that says if there are other items open, close all the other ones, just open this one. So you're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'll just stick a little if statement in my set state call, and that'd be fine." Okay. And then somebody else, and then you accept a prop called single is true, and you're off to the races, you're good. Then somebody else comes and says, "Hey, so I liked your original thing too, but I just need it so that they can't close the item. So they need to be able to, I need to be able to prevent a tab from being closed." And you say, "Oh, okay, that's another if statement in my set state call. Not a huge deal, it's okay. I'll just say PreventClose is true, and now my if statement will take care of that." Cool, okay, so this is a pretty reusable component. You're thinking, yeah, like lots of people can use this, lots of different use cases are covered. And then somebody says, "Hey, I I need both of those things. So I need only one open at once, and I need it to, you need to be able to prevent it from closing. So yeah, you can't close it, but only one is open at once. Okay, so now your set state call is actually starting to get a little bit complex, and you're thinking maybe I should extract this into a pure function or something, and so I can test it a little easier. So yeah, it starts to get a little bit unwieldy. And then somebody was using this and they realized, hey, hold on a second. Oh, sorry, man, I gotta remember. So now you just specify single is true and prevent close, and you're good to go. So somebody looked at this and they said, hold on, that looks kind of strangely like a tabs UI. I wonder if I could use this for tabs. I fixed this thing. I thought that I had fixed it. All right. Okay. That. Oh, that's nice. I like it. This is a new feature actually. They didn't used to let you choose the fade-ins like that. And so they just tried it and they said, hey, yeah, I tried this thing and it works. Will you merge my pull request? And you're like, well, that kind of complicates the. I mean, it doesn't change the state, it's just a UI change, but now I've got to deal with top, left, right, bottom, and now rendering the tabs and the contents kind of separate. So it's, well, they're like, well, I won't mess up your render thing. I'll just make another render that's RenderTabs as another method on the class, and I'll say if tabs, then call RenderTabs. Otherwise, we'll just keep doing what you were always doing. And you say, oh, okay, I guess that kind of keeps it separate, so it makes it a little easier. And then like you just leverage the single and prevent close. So you're like, okay, cool. But you're starting to get kind of sad about this. You're like, man, this accordion component was like pretty simple to start with, but now it's starting to get like use cases are starting to pile onto this thing. Rats. Let me fix that. This is why we practice. And this one needs to be. Okay. And then somebody says, hey, I need tabs below. So that like the tabs UI that you have, I need tabs below. Okay. So now you're changing that render tabs method, and you have that position above now. And like, you know, you decided, hey, let's abstract this tabs version of this thing into another component so that I don't have to pass all those props over and over. But now you're feeling pretty upset about life because this thing that was so simple is now clobbered with all these different use cases. And then somebody comes to you and says, hey, I know that you're using regular CSS to do this. Here, actually, I should wait for the tiers. I know that you're using regular CSS to do this, but in our project, we're not using regular CSS. We like to avoid that. We're using emotion, CSS and JS, because it's the new hotness and we love that. And then you're crying because you're like, well, now I have to accept different class names and apply them in the right place. Oh my goodness, this is gonna be a nightmare. And that's not all. You can imagine in the future, not only a title, they want to have an open title, so it looks different when it's open, and contents, they want to have like a disabled support, and you have your single and prevent close and position and items, but you also have open trigger, close trigger, title class name, contents class name, on trigger, close class name, open class name, render, expand all button. Like you have these specific elements or specific props that are specific to how things are rendered. The constant clicking is kind of distracting. That's probably a good point, Anthony. Would it help at all if I make this not auto or not loop and I just show the controls? So so you get onto this page and I hit play and you just look through that once, and I'm talking about it as it's going through, and then it stops. Would that be better? Let me know. Let me know what you think. Not valid. Actually, it is, Josh. That wouldn't be valid if we were inside the children, but it is valid inside of the props. which, yeah, that's kind of confusing, but nope, totally valid there, Josh. But thanks for looking out for me. So here's the problem. We have so many props in here that are specific to rendering or specific to managing state that it has made not only our implementation, but also our API really complicated. And that just makes for sad developers. And here are a couple of the reasons why it makes us sad, not just for that, but it makes our bundle size bigger, because now this single component has like 30 use cases, and so it has the code for all of those use cases. And so if I want to use this component, I have to pay the cost for the code for all those use cases. And that makes me not want to use your reusable component, because it's going to increase my bundle size. It's maintenance overhead for not only the user of this component, but also you, the maintainer. You have to worry about, how do I make sure I don't break all these other use cases that I'm supporting as I'm developing out these features. And then the implementation complexity just yields tons and tons of bugs. It's really easy to break things because you're covering so many use cases, and it gets really complicated because it's all just built right in there in that single component. And the API gets more complex. So people have to learn all like 30 different props. Or I did a little survey and I found a component that has over 110 props. Wow. And it's a reusable component. Now it's fine if this is your top level component, you're passing all your data around, maybe you're not using Redux or something. But on a reusable component, having 110 props, that is a really complex API to learn, and like just the prop types definition is complex. So that's not very fun. And I just threw 2 more criers in here because this is all just so very sad. So what if I told you that all of the things you just saw were all implemented using the same 37-line component? Would you believe me? Here it is. Here is that single. Oh yeah, the apocalypse. Oh, thanks, Tony. I need to throw that in there. Yeah, let's see. I'll add a to-do for myself. To-do apocalypse. Yeah, somebody tweeted, her name's Jen, I think. She tweeted a apocalypse. I need to find that tweet and put it in here. So here's our accordion component. It even has default props. Kind of fun. So it's actually pretty simple. And what makes it so simple is because it's implementing 2 really awesome patterns that I've come to use and love in my reusable components. And that is render props, here with this.props children, and state reducers. And just with these 2 simple features, we're able to take all of those use cases and support every single one of those use cases and many, many more by kind of offloading some of these decisions onto the users of our components. Prop in bolds. Prop. If you can clarify what you mean by prop in bolds, that'd be helpful. So you can come and take a look at this a little bit further later. We're not going to get too far into the implementation details here, and I've got lots of material for you to learn this stuff. But I want to communicate to you that by building things in a way that has fewer opinions, you can provide something that's more valuable. And you can build things on top of that to build opinionated things on top of that to just grab the pieces and the use cases that you really care about. So let's look at a couple examples. So here's that standard accordion, the first accordion that we saw, and it's implementing, it's using the accordion render prop API. It doesn't need to manage state any differently than the default, so it doesn't have a state reducer, but we're taking the open indexes, the handle item click, and we're rendering an accordion item with the accordion button, and on click we're going to handle the item click and accordion contents. And here we're using React posed because it's just awesome to do our animations. So we have total control over how things work. We know when things are open, so we can toggle which direction the hand is pointing. All of that stuff is supported by this simple 37-line component. And from a user standpoint, yes, I have to specify quite a bit more. I have to do a lot more work as a user to get things to work. But if the nice thing is that I can now use this standard accordion throughout my app, and I'm accepting items. So now users of this standard accordion can just say items and accordion items. And they'll get that accordion. They don't need to worry about the render prop API or any of that stuff. We can compose these nice things on top of that, which I think is pretty cool. And so this is where you get those like sensible defaults that you're looking for, is by making that base component your flexible, super duper flexible, not a whole lot of defaults, and then you build things on top of that that do have those really useful and handy defaults. And then if the standard accordion is doing what they want, then that's awesome. If it's not, then they can maybe copy it and modify it, or build something entirely from scratch. So let's take a look at what this would look like if we wanted to change this to support or change it to be the above version where the contents show above. So I'm just going to look at a couple of git diffs here. So we're going to move the accordion contents above, and then we're going to change the direction of the the pointer finger. Maybe I should just get rid of that feature. I thought it was cool, but maybe a little distracting, because pretty much all that you really need to do is just move the accordion contents above. Ta-da! That's pretty simple. Okay, what about right? So if I want to go from that standard one to the right, now I'm just going to change my grid autoflow to column. Ta-da! And that's it. And then what if I want to support that single prevent close? Well, I support this state reducer, and so I have this combined reducers where I can take this single and the prevent close, combine those into a single state reducer, and as the state gets changed, it goes through my state reducers, which will change how that state change is going to happen and make sure that it's preventing close and only letting one open at a time. That's leveraging the state reducer pattern. So I don't need to change anything else. I just provide a state reducer. And then for tabs, that actually is just using the state reducer. So I can use that same combined reducer, single prevent close, and I pass that to the accordion as the state reducer. And now I have a tabs component that has that default built in. And so now I can use that tabs component for that standard tabs, and that allows me to have this tab button and a tab item where I render each one of the items for the buttons and then each one of the items for the contents. And then if I want to switch the buttons to be below and the items above, guess what I have to do? I just switch them, and it's pretty simple. And so all I'm having to pay for is the use case that I'm actually trying to support. There's not a whole lot really there that you have to worry about, and I think that's a pretty neat thing that these patterns enable. All of this is just on top of a 37-line component, highly reusable, easily composable, so that you can provide components that have nice and sensible defaults. And for users who fall into the categories, the 80% of the users who fall into the categories for those defaults, then they're great and they're just as happy as they were before. And for anybody who wants their really unique use case, you can satisfy them with these basic APIs, with this really fundamental API. So before I wrap up, I just want to give a word of caution about this. So what if this is the only default or the only thing that you ever need? This is like you built out this really wonderfully flexible component, and this is all that is ever used. It's ever used for. We need to talk about costs and benefits. Please do not try to solve problems that you don't have. So you could build that first component that's really simple, really basic, and then when people start coming to you and saying, hey, I have these other use cases, at that point when you've decided, hey, like maybe it'd be nice if I could support those use cases, but not have to pay the cost as a maintainer. That's when you decide, okay, let's start implementing some of these patterns, not before. There's the concept of YAGNI, you ain't gonna need it. And I think that's an important thing to take into consideration when we're writing software. We don't want to waste our time or waste the people who are paying us, waste their time by trying to build things that nobody's actually going to need or use. Now, that said, it can be a lot of fun to work in these patterns, and it's in many cases it doesn't add a whole lot of complexity to add some of these patterns, but often you will be adding complexity to the implementation to support these different patterns at the very start. Now, these patterns open up a huge array of supported use cases, but like I said, if you don't have if you don't ever have those use cases, then you're paying a cost for a benefit that you never actually realize. And so then your costs are greater than your benefits, and it wasn't worth it in the first place. So be careful there. Use patterns that simplify your API. And that's what I want to leave you. Knit missing 2 before Wallow and Rhino say, oh no. Well, that was a copy paste, Tony. So I'm going to chalk that up as Google's problem. Whoops. If I end up re-recording these, which I don't think that I will, but if I do, then I'll make sure to check on that. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, Tony's asking if the state reducer breaks encapsulation. That is you're not the first to ask me that question. Yes, it does. So your state is now part of your API. You just have to accept that, and I'm fine with that. Once you've accepted that your state is part of your API, then I don't really think of it as breaking encapsulation. Maybe it sort of is, but like at the end of the day, I don't really care. I mostly care about shipping stuff that is my users like, and I can do that better when I use the state reducer. So the idea that I want to leave with you all is that you should use patterns that simplify your components API. So patterns that we've seen here, like render props and state reducers, have really simplified the implementation or the API of our component. Now, it did kind of complicate some of the implementation a little bit, but for the benefit of a simpler API, I think that's a real win. And I think the same could be said for React. React seriously simplified our API for building web applications. While the internals of React are fairly complicated, it provides us a really simple API to build these things. And so I think it's a nice trade-off. There are lots of other patterns that we didn't talk about today. Compound components, definitely an accordion is a great example of a place where you could use a compound component to make things simpler. And the nice thing is that you can build lots of these patterns on top of others. So I actually have an example elsewhere where it takes this render props API and builds compound components on top of that. Also control props and state reducers actually solve many of the same problems. Control props are actually more powerful, but a little bit, it kind of pushes more complexity onto the user. And so I prefer state reducers when I can, but support both when I need to. And control props are really awesome, something to learn. And then providers, with React Create Context, this has become so much easier. And looking for ways that you can share implicit state between components. This is especially useful with compound components. Using providers the provider pattern can really help you simplify your components API. And let's discover a whole bunch more. Let's rediscover more. One of the cool things about computer science is we're always rediscovering things. Like promises were nothing new. That was something that we'd known or had been researched long ago in research papers. And so the real secret to looking super smart is to go read a couple research papers from like 20 years ago and introduce them or apply them to today's technology. So go rediscover some awesome patterns, and especially with the things that we have coming up in React, like async mode and the suspense API and those things. I'm sure that we're going to find a lot more awesome things that we can do with React and different patterns that we can use to make our API simpler. And with that, I just will say thank you. Ciao. So I think y'all are like maybe 10 seconds behind me, but hopefully that went well. I'm actually going to stop this stream and I'm going to go check out, I think my wife is home, so I'll go say hi. Then I'm going to practice my my how to react talk, which I've actually given before, so I'm not quite as shaky on that one. But yeah, if you have any other feedback, feel free to leave it. And yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks. I hope you all are awesome. Bye. Do I have a goodbye thing? I have a starting. No, I need to. Yeah, I have a starting. I'll be right back. I have my dev tips thing, which is pretty cool. I need to have like a Kent's Talks thing. I have a just me, hi, and I have a just screen, which clearly needs to be fixed. Whoop. But I don't have a goodbye. So, bye.